everyone else around us to pieces for that inch. We claw with our fingernails for that inch. Because we know when we add up all those inches, that's gonna make the fucking difference between winning and losing.
Hell, you could say that 10,000 times and it still wouldn't be enough.
It fires me up, man.
I love it. Say it one more time.
Shake and bake!
Does that feel good?
Yeah, it rhymes. They're both verbs.
It's awesome.
And welcome back, folks, to the latest, greatest episode of the Shaving Points podcast. My name is Quentin Crisco. You can find me on Twitter at BuckisStats. You can find the podcast on Twitter at shaving_points. That's PTS_pod. I'm joined here, as always, by my co-host, Jayden May. How you doing today, Jay?
Doing fantastic off another Big 12 national championship in college basketball. Big 12 runs college basketball. My name is Jay. You can find me on Twitter at JMay56. Follow us on Instagram at Shaving Points, or YouTube, Shaving Points, Facebook, Shaving Points. We're everywhere. Any social media platform you have, come give us a like, come give us a follow, interact with the boys, let us know what you think. Also, don't forget to visit the store where we have awesome merch. We got the Adidas pullovers, which everybody seems to love. We got backpacks, fanny packs, everything you need for the spring. So come check it out. Give the boys, subscribe to our website as well, because everything that we post on any social media you can get directly from the website. So on the Reddit, on the YouTube, everything, it's all there on the website, and you can subscribe for free on the website, get all the pics, get all the information, all the charts, all the graphs that we make, everything be sent directly to you. It's awesome. It's just a stream of content. So check it out. Let us know what you think. Buy some merch, support the boys, and let's go.
Any place you can find points, you'll find us there shaving them.
Yes, sir.
So we have a very special guest joining us today, the one and only Robert K. Schmitz, the master of YouTube, Chicago Bears film study. This guy puts out some amazing content, and I'm very excited to have him on the show. How you doing today, Robert?
Pop it up.
I'm doing great. I mean, we are just finally getting to the point where we can say free agency is kind of over. Like, I don't want to say that too loud or another big receiver is going to get traded. But at least where we sit right now, it feels like we can finally start doing draft study, because truly, like, and this is one of my first seasons really studying even just the top 3 rounds, because going in depth on prospects is difficult. But I feel like there's no sense doing draft study until you know what a team looks like. I know I was convinced that the Bears would be signing a major veteran center for a very long time, and therefore didn't look at any centers, because I was like, we're not going to need one. And here we are with Lucas Patrick. But I'm getting ahead of myself. It means we finally can start really focusing on all the teams in the NFL, who's going to be looking at taking who. A lot of receivers are going to be coming off the board, but that's nothing new. And it'll be really interesting to talk with you guys about what y'all are seeing, where we think guys are going to go, and who fits where.
Absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. So I think go ahead, Jay.
I was going to say one of my biggest theories that I haven't really looked into, but in my opinion, wide receiver is quickly becoming one of the most expendable positions in the NFL, with all the wide receiver talent coming out year after year in the draft, that these big contracts to wide receivers are starting to look like what everybody talked about running back contracts about 5 to 6 years ago, when they're like, why are we still paying running backs when you can go draft a guy in the second, third round and get close to or equal production from a guy you're paying a long-term deal on. So I think we're slowly getting there, but then you see Christian Kirk's contract and you're like, well, maybe not. So
I can't help but feel like it depends on the wide receiver. I mean, the interesting thing about running backs is that awful cliff that I know you guys know that running backs hit. I can't remember where it is. People used to say it was 1,000 carries, and I think it got proved to be a little bit different than just that flat number. But running backs expire so fast. It's a shame. And I would love to see things, not to get too hot takey too fast, but renegotiated to fit the fact that there's a guy in Chicago for years. His name was Jordan Howard. And he was basically like the bulwark of the Bears' absolutely terrible offense. And truly, the Bears spent him. And he gave every ounce of his body throughout the course of his rookie contract and never recouped a dollar. And on the other hand, then you've got teams like the Cowboys, who they draft a very capable running back in Ezekiel Elliott and end up paying through the nose just to give him a second deal. That means they can't bench him for Tony Pollard when he's playing on what feels like 1.5 legs, despite the fact that Pollard seemed fresh, and it might have cost him a playoff game. I mean, running back to me is such a specific disaster, whereas wide receiver seems like right now a make or break position that to me is bordering on quarterback levels of you have to have it right. You can't just pay Christian Kirk $18 million. You have to find the Jamar Chase, the Justin Jefferson, the Tyreek Hill, the crazy game breakers, because it's rare that you put together a team like what the Bills had, where you have Stephon Diggs, who I love Stephon Diggs as much as the next guy, maybe even a little more. But I would even tell you that I think that maybe at best he's like a top 12 wide receiver. And by that, I mean he might be 12. The fact that you have complementary players like Dawson Knox and Gabriel Davis and Stephon Diggs making up that Bills receiving room with Josh Allen is a little rarer than the standard. This guy just flat out dominates and everybody else is just sort of there. Like what we saw with Cooper Kupp, like what nobody talks about with Mike Evans. I mean, normally you have that just ultra guy, and the Bills really didn't, but they're the rare one to do so. I can't help but feel like it's not that the wide receiver position is expendable, but you have to have it right. You can't just pay somebody to pay somebody. It has to be worth it.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things you said there, like mentioning the QB part, it almost makes, because on some degree, I do agree with Jayton on it, like, that it seems like a shift towards like a running back. What's happened to running backs is kind of happening, but also a running back isn't as pertinent to a quarterback. Wide receiver and that chemistry is very important for the quarterback. So it's kind of, it creates this weird balance of Devontae Adams has been with Aaron Rodgers for this long. We need to pay him to make sure he stays here because they've been so good together. And that relationship has been so profitable for us, or so lucrative for us.
And ironically, if you guys don't mind me just segueing us right into Cowboys draft preview, I know there was something, Jayden, you and I were kind of hinting at before the show where we wanted to talk about CeeDee Lamb and the pick that happened when it did. I think one thing that is, it's only barely starting to become discussed, but we need to talk about it, is how important fit in an offense is for wide receivers. That when the Cowboys drafted CeeDee Lamb, they were pouring clear talent onto an already freshly baked breakfast, if that makes sense. You were adding more maple syrup to something that didn't necessarily need more maple syrup because everybody already had a role. And there's nothing wrong with that. But if Kellen Moore, who I don't think is some like dingus out there at offensive coordinator, had that much trouble sharing the ball between Amari Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, maybe there's a deeper issue. And if you ask me, the issue is that CeeDee and Amari kind of play similar positions. I mean, sure, I think CeeDee's good enough to play Z receiver, slot receiver, X receiver, any real receiver position that you ask of him. Sure. But also, both guys are superstars. Both guys are star targets. Both guys have the speed to take the top off of a defense. Both guys, in my opinion, are what you more often than not really want an X receiver, which ironically is also Michael Gallup, who is a classic X receiver. I think the Cowboys are a nice reminder, and I hope that they take advantage of this, that having different types of receivers makes a team more dangerous than just having raw talent that, quote unquote, will figure out how to use them later. And I would love to see the Cowboys. I mean, whether it is, I'll name some names that we can get into, whether it's Traylon Burks, Chris Olave, Sky Moore, Jahan Dotson, there are some phenomenal Z or slot receivers that I think would add a lot of just quickness that they used to have with, guy we don't really talk about anymore, Cole Beasley, but now could potentially add back to the roster, where I think that would do a lot of good for a Cowboys roster, that their passing attack is not diverse. And Dak Prescott is obviously a very good quarterback, and yet they seem to be missing that little thing that's going to put them over the edge. If you ask me, it's an electric inside the numbers, like between the hashes receiver, so that they can let the guys who play are just superstars outside the numbers remain as such. What do you think?
Yeah, so I love the CeeDee Lamb pick when they took it. I thought we should have traded Cooper for everything that you said. Just said I think he should have been traded last year, because I think him and CD do play a similar role. CD's younger, he's cheaper, he's going to be around a lot longer. And then on top of that, Michael Gallup, he's your big play guy. He can go up and catch any ball. CD's yards after catch guy, get him out in space. And then Cedric Wilson, which I think we should have paid for what the contract he got. I think he was that perfect receiver that you're talking about.
He's exactly that guy.
To run in the slot. Why we didn't pay him what he got paid in free agency is baffling to me, because I thought he would get a much bigger contract than that, and he didn't. And so that kind of hurt to see. But I love the CD pick, but I think Cooper should have been gone before he was, and that's no knock against Cooper. But like you said, him and CD are the same player almost. And when you have the same player opposite sides of each other, it's not always going to mesh. So
the quarterback can only look one place at a time. I mean, I was talking about somebody with this just the other day, Q, where quarterbacks have to go through their reads one at a time. And if you've got somebody like DK Metcalf, that's either, I don't know how much you guys know DK Metcalf on the Seahawks, but he is either going to win and win fast, or he's not going to win at all. You're going to know whether he's covered very quickly. On the other
hand, you don't got to worry about throwing a pick six his way.
No, not really. But it's more to say,
99.
just to be sure of like what I'm saying is going through, though, that DK Metcalf's not really the guy to win on your second progression or your third progression. If he didn't win off the line, he didn't win. On the other hand, Tyler Lockett can win later in his routes. He may not even win immediately. You can give him a slightly longer stem and let him play with it and get to him later in the progression. Whereas I can't help but feel like the Cowboys set up their offense around a bunch of guys that were great first progression guys and didn't give Dak a bunch of true progressions to go through outside of Cedric, who definitely plays that role. And exactly, and Schultz. And I'm curious to see if they could potentially work their offense a little bit more. And it may not be receiver. It could be offensive line, which would be a perfectly sensible pick to give Dak that little bit more time. But I can't help but feel like they need to pour a little bit more into their offense. And then I'm sure Cowboys fans out there are going to agree with me, though it's probably the most frustrating topic to talk about. Dak's got to show that it's worth it. Like we're approaching critical mass, where the Cowboys have got to make a deeper run in the playoffs than some of these last couple of years. Because I know as a Bears fan, we did this dance with Jay Cutler for years, where we said,
"Hey, went to
this
an
is the
NFC
year.
championship.
This has to be
I've
the
never
year."
seen an NFC championship in my life.
The 8th year is the breakout year.
Right,
absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, Dak's got to be more consistent. I mean, sometimes he does it in the fourth quarter, sometimes he does it in the first quarter. But it just seems like no matter what, it's never a full game, full season, no matter what it is. And he's always going to put up monster numbers. And you just don't know if he's going to come through or not. And when he does come through, it's like, oh, like, what are we worried about? He's always here. And then when he doesn't come through, it's always somebody else's fault. Like, Dak gets more passes for being the Cowboys quarterback than I've ever seen in my lifetime. Tony Romo got buried for every single loss that he had. We lost to Peyton Manning in Denver, like 45-44, and Tony Romo had like the second greatest statistical game of all time.
Amazing football
and
game.
People buried him because he threw a pick in the fourth quarter after throwing 5 touchdowns and 500 yards and throwing for like 78% completion percentage, having better numbers than Peyton Manning, who threw 2 picks that nobody talks about.
He did it off 24 throws too. It might have been less than that. Like, he was just finding guys wide open. That's a crazy game.
Torched them. One of the craziest games I've ever seen in my life. And when you score over 40 against a defense that was as good as Denver's that year, you should win that game. And that's just one example of people burying Tony Romo. And I mean, the Cowboys were building towards a Romo Super Bowl, and then he got hurt, and then Dak's rookie year was like the ultimate like Romo team, and I think that's also why they took Zeke instead of Jalen Ramsey. It was a win now move. And if you put Romo on that rookie team with Zeke, it's completely different, in my opinion. He played one series that entire year. It was against Philadelphia. He took on 4 plays, 76 yards, threw a touchdown perfectly to Terrence Williams. It was the most crisp, most clean that offense looked the entire year. And then we rolled Dak out against Green Bay and got housed in the first half. And then he made a somewhat heroic comeback only to get just pummeled by Aaron Rodgers with 56 seconds left and Mason Crossbar to hit a 58-yard field goal to win. It was just heartbreaking, but I mean, that was Romo's team. Everything was leading up to that moment for Tony Romo.
Jayden, I feel like you've had this conversation a few times before.
Oh,
Never in my life.
I mean, hey, to be fair, this is that like hill that Cowboys fans just tumble down. I mean, you get them talking, especially lately, about Tony Romo. I mean, so I grew up a Bears fan. If you need any intro on me, one thing that was always funny was whenever I would watch Tony Romo and see the way Cowboys fans talked about him, I saw a lot of similarity to the way that Bears fans talked about Jay Cutler, which was to say the whole team's losing was always Jay's fault. And anytime we won, it wasn't always Jay's credit. So suddenly every loss was Tony's fault. I remember at one point after years of Tony Romo, and I don't want to get too far off because now I'm sure this has been talked about before, but I personally believe that the only reason Tony Romo didn't win a Super Bowl, ironically, is because Tony wouldn't let the team lose. And so since he just kept the team around 8-8, just like come hell or high water, the team kept convincing themselves they were a piece away. And so finally he got hurt. Immediately they went 4-12. Finally they fixed the team, and then Tony's career was over, which RIP. But I feel like the Cowboys are truly at a complicated spot here. Like I want to talk deep draft, which we're going to get the chance to do with the Bears. But I really feel like the Cowboys have got to know within the next 2 years whether Dak is the guy they paid, because if not, you got to get in line. Like there are some major changes that have to be made.
That's the worst thing about the quarterback position in the NFL, because it's like, do you pay a guy who's top 12 just because you can't do any better? Or do you just go and flush everything down the toilet and just hope and pray that you land a top guy? Because even if you're bad, that doesn't guarantee you're going to land a top guy. There's no guarantees. And it might be the new NFL now. I mean, Denver just went and traded for a top 5 guy. Cleveland just went and traded for what many consider to be a top 5 guy. I don't know what you consider Deshaun Watson at this point.
Dak Prescott. There's no way you couldn't trade Dak Prescott. Definitely.
I'm saying you could trade him, but I'm saying like that unless we just land a big QB in the draft that we can like build around, we trade Dak, and then it's like, who do we go trade for? It's like Patrick Mahomes ain't going nowhere. Like Deshaun Watson just got to like maybe like what's his name for the Chargers? Like maybe
Herbert?
Yeah, like hypothetically speaking though. Like what do you do? Like if you trade
spin the wheel.
Like you spin the wheel, like maybe Herbert's
do the same thing the Bears have been doing for my entire life.
Maybe Herbert's not happy, and like it only like. We always thought Russ was going to stay in Seattle forever. Then it took one offseason, and all of a sudden he was going to Chicago. He was going everywhere. And then a year later he gets traded. Like, who's to say that same thing doesn't happen for a guy like Herbert or a guy like Josh Allen? Like, Josh Allen's not going to get run out of Buffalo, don't get me wrong. But, like, hypothetically speaking, it takes one thing, and then they become available, and then you have to go all in and get them. And that's where I think Denver made the right move is, like, when a guy like Russell Wilson's available, you go get him.
And as a Dallas local, I mean, Q, I don't know how often you're watching Cowboys games, but
I live in Texas, so quite a bit.
as a Dallas local, he drives me nuts because I've watched him smoke the NFC least for these huge
NFC
games.
Beast.
And everybody talks about like Dak just
right.
threw for 500 yards, and people are asking questions. And then all of a sudden, would you believe it? Drew Brees is hurt. You're gonna get the Saints' backup quarterback. And if I had told Cowboys fans going into that game in the Superdome, hey, your defense, who none of you guys like, this was 2020 if you can't pick up on it, your defense is gonna hold the Saints to 14 points. Most of them would they'd start drinking early. They'd be like, we did it, easy win, nailed it.
That's a very typical Dak game, right? Like that's a perfect example too. The exact same thing happened against Seattle. I think the exact same year where Seattle comes in,
and New England. New England was rough. I don't think they scored a touchdown in that game.
Yeah, Seattle came in on a 3-game losing streak. Russ looked bad. He couldn't get anything going. Defense starts out hot, gets a pick. Dak goes 3 and out. Russ takes the field down or takes the team down, scores a touchdown. Dak comes back, throws a pick. And then before you know it, we're down to a bad Seattle team. I think a 3-6 Seattle team at the time. It was week 9. And we're down early. And then Seattle uses that game as a springboard and ends up like, I think like 9-7 that year.
Typical.
After they were just free falling. They couldn't buy a win. And the Cowboys were so hot going to that game. We should have crushed them. We were like 8-point favorites in Seattle. It was like unheard of. And Dak just shits the bed.
Oh yeah. And so as much as like, I mean, you got some great guys on the board, Q. Like, Devontae Wyatt is a beast. Tyler Linderbaum can play. Chris Olave would be perfect. Like, he would be a perfect pair, I think, with CD and with what Michael Gallup are doing. And I get it. To some degree, you will always get diminishing returns on receivers because there is only one football. But come playoff time, a lot of these guys can make a huge difference. But at the end of the day, I mean, I think you could roll the ball out with the team that Dallas has right now and expect big things. Like the Cowboys.
The NFC is weak right now. I mean,
I know.
On paper, I mean, this is every year conversation, but on paper, we're a Super Bowl contender for the NFC.
Pre-draft.
Already, right now. I mean, sure, there's some things you can do better, but I mean, look at all the other teams like outside of the Rams, who I think the Rams have a lot of weaknesses too. And they showed it all throughout the season and kind of just went on a lucky stretch, got the home field, and then had a miracle comeback against Tom Brady, which we never see. But, I mean, I think the Rams have holes,
we were,
Cowboys
as a podcast, we were all aboard the Rams are frauds train last year, and it proved to be right, as we all know.
Of course.
I still think they're frauds. Like, everything just went right for them at the end of the season. Like, I still don't think they're as good as they finished out the season.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's all about getting hot. I mean,
man,
Cincinnati went to the Super Bowl. Like,
the story nobody is telling is about how both of those teams, quote unquote, didn't deserve to be there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Where both of them were unlikely. I mean, both of them had, to talk on the Rams, it's not that they didn't earn their wins. It's that San Francisco kind of took care of the dirty work for them.
Yeah.
Like
San Francisco
the Rams
beat the Cowboys, they beat the Packers, and then it was like, all you have to do is like not lose to a team for the third time in a year. And rarely does a team beat any team 3 times in a year. It's damn near impossible.
Yeah.
So you're getting a team that beat you twice in the NFC Championship after they beat the almighty Packers and a very, very streaky but sometimes good Dallas Cowboys team.
Talented at the very least.
Yeah. A team that can go out there and hang 60 on you at any given Sunday and also lay an egg. But still a team you don't want to see in the NFC Championship, that's for sure.
And I mean, on the other side of it, again, this always sounds like I'm dunking on neither of these teams. They're obviously good or they wouldn't have been in, let alone one of them won the Super Bowl. But at the same time, if you asked any Bengals fan, do you think you can beat the 1 seed and also beat the Chiefs and also and just ask all these questions about
you're down double digits to the Chiefs in the AFC Championship. Do you think you're going to win that game?
Right. Like it's 21-0 after 1. How you feeling? Like, I mean, that there was a ton of improbability, and kudos to Matt Stafford, he literally went to my high school, so yay. But kudos to Matt Stafford for taking home a Lombardi because he joins an echelon of quarterbacks that is rarefied air. Does it make him Hall of Famer? Who cares? Like, he can retire whenever he does, knowing he got to the top of the mountain. And Joe Burrow, on the other hand, threatens to walk the Dan Marino path if they can't figure out the offensive line, where he
That's
gets
the
to
guy
a Super
Cowboys
Bowl
can
in
go
his
get.
second year and never gets back. It's always possible.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and so at this stage, I am so curious to see what happens. But the scary part, if I am a Dallas Cowboy fan, and I know too many of them, is that you're already hearing apathy, because the Cowboys fans out there, and I agree, can't imagine a more talented team than last year. I mean, the defense came together. They had everything Cowboys fans have been asking for forever.
Had the turnovers, had a
Nobody could question the wide
DeMarcus
receiver
Lawrence
room.
is one of the best run stoppers in the league. He can rush the passer. Randy Gregory is great. That whole team is great. Keanu O'Neal doing his thing.
Micah
Yeah,
Parsons was a video game creative character. He
We
was
don't
good.
talk about Micah
Like,
Parsons. He's so good. Like, he's so good. He's just unspeakable. He's just his own entity.
You can't put into words what he did last year. So like, flat out.
after years of crappy DBs being like the hallmark of the Dallas Cowboys, their whole defense really did everything every young Cowboys fan has ever been dreaming of, and they got bounced in the first round. I mean, like, it was such a knife.
You don't gotta tell me.
I know. I'm just saying that, like, as a third party, right? I don't blame a soul out there that's bummed out. I don't blame a soul that's almost got their head in their hands saying, like, I don't even really care who we draft. Like, I don't even really care. I have to see the results, because it can't all be Mike McCarthy's fault when you got talent like this. Like, there's a decent chance that I could give the two of you guys clipboards and you could win 8 games next year, like, with these rosters. Like,
and that's like the unspoken truth about Cowboys fans. Everybody wants to talk about how Cowboys fans are like the worst fans in the NFL. It's like, we haven't sniffed an NFC championship like since I've been cognitive and a fan of football.
Well,
Like,
yes, you have. And it ended, and I don't blame anybody for blacking the catch out. Like,
well, yeah, I guess that was sniffing it. Yeah, that was the only time we've sniffed it. Like, and the fact that you have to like preface it with just sniffing it, just almost being there. That's the closest we've ever got. Is a bad call away. And the only reason why we're in that game is because we won the previous game on a bad call. We should have lost to the Lions in the first round. So, I mean, if we're really getting down to it, we shouldn't have been there in the first place. Like, that's the closest we've been to an NFC championship in my cognitive fanhood.
Yeah.
I forgot about that line. That's good.
It's so complicated.
And you talk about a team, never seen a team as talented as this past year. That 2014 team was every bit of what we were this past year.
Oh, yeah.
DeMarco Murray with a fumble in the last 2 minutes of the game, giving the ball back to Aaron Rodgers with a double-digit lead. Like, and then it's Romo's fault. And then it's Dez's fault. I mean, it's everybody else's fault. Like,
and that's the thing. I can't help but feel like if the Cowboys got to draft an abstract entity, they just need accountability. It sounds so unbelievably silly, right? But I really think that at the end of all of this, the Cowboys, more so than a lot of teams, just need to reach the end of the year with conclusions drawn. I mean, Bears fans have been talking about this for forever, where it was like, I don't, 2021 doesn't matter. I don't know what we're going to do. But end the season with an answer on something. Like, don't waste this year. And
every year, and that's every year for Cowboys fans right now. It's like, we can't waste this year. And then at the end of the year, it's like, oh, we wasted it. Let's try again next year. Like, that's still good, we think. I don't know.
I really think for what it's worth, I do really think that a turnaround is possible. They've just got to get their heads on straight. I mean, we'll see what happens. But as usual, we probably won't get to know week 1. We had a phenomenal game against the Buccaneers last year.
One of the greatest games of the entire season.
We will end up knowing sometime around week 12 whether the wheels are starting to fall off, because I still remember
we'll be 11-1 and then lose out.
I still remember finishing up a Bears game, finishing up a podcast, looking and being like, the Cowboys lost to the Broncos? They got shut out? That's weird. Huh. I guess anything does happen. And little
Lost
did I
to the
know
Raiders
that was
on
like
Thanksgiving.
the start of the end.
Yeah, but okay, so you're the draft expert. So who we draft? Who the Cowboys drafting here? I love Chris Olave.
I think Olave makes a lot of sense. I think that everybody
I love
wants a
him
wide
so much.
receiver. Well, I mean, he's an obvious choice. Won't surprise me if, like you're saying, they go Linderbaum, they go
Love
Zion
him.
Johnson.
Jacoby
Like
Dean, love
they're
him.
gonna. Yeah, exactly. Like there are some major options. One name to watch. This definitely applies to the Bears too. But there's this kid out of Tulsa, an offensive tackle named Tyler Smith, and absolutely nobody has any idea when he's going to get drafted. I mean, like
He eats glass for breakfast, I hear.
he's been projected in the late first. He's been projected in the third. Nobody can really tell because the gist on him is that he's one of the most violent players that we've seen in college football since Kyle Long, and which is a throwback. And he's just as raw. Like he has some tape that is, I don't need to pretend it's good. It's flat out bad. And yet his physical ability is insane. To give you an example, in 2021, so I'm sure you guys have watched plenty of offensive line just over the years. And normally when an edge rusher gets outside of a player's frame, imagine this being the frame, like they get out here, they run right by him as if there is no resistance whatsoever, right? Tyler Smith at one point got beat by Bijai Sanders in their 2021 edition of the Cincinnati Tulsa game. And somehow Tyler Smith put his right arm out and just stopped him cold. I mean, zero movement, and held him there for about a second and a half. Now, he got beat. So it's not like this is a good rep. And his guard had to bump over. And when it did, it opened up a green dog blitz that got the quarterback sacked. So bad results. But the torque this kid can generate is so rare. And it shows up in the run game. It shows up in the pass game. He is just violent. And the violence comes because of a raw physical ability to just punish people. It's nonsense. And so I don't know if that means he's going to be a Cowboy. I don't know if it means he's going to be a Bear. I have no idea. But every single year, Draftniks think they've got the board sorted. And then somebody ends up slipping to the 3 that was projected to go at 15. And somebody ends up drafted that people go, what in the world?
He wasn't even on the board.
Not even
Exactly.
not even just people. The best people to do this.
Mhm.
Like I've been tracking big boards for the last 3 drafts. I'm doing it again this year. Every single year, there's a guy who goes like in the top 75 picks who nobody had in their top 200.
Yep.
And every year, there's someone in their top 50 who falls below the top 200, who goes in like the 7th round somewhere. It's incredible.
Yeah. And I'll be the first to say that there's a lot of that comes down to the unintentional groupthink of not knowing who to research. I don't want to look at 500 players. I don't want to look at 1,000 players. I don't have the time. I don't have the patience. There's enough going on in my life, and I don't do this for a living, though I wish I would.
Yeah.
Like, I can't do that. So I can only take a look at the top 100, meaning that there's no chance if I put together a big board that I'd have that stuff. But Tyler Smith is absolutely that guy that I think right now way too many people are riding off the fact that he was originally like projected in the 4th round, and people follow these projections almost a little too much. And Smith has physical traits that most of these other linemen just flat out don't have. And he's way too raw, but he's also literally 20. I mean, he is newly 21. He just turned 21. So he is as
you said it. He sounds like Kyle Long to a T.
Like Tyron Smith coming into the league at like 20.
Mm-hmm.
Like
exactly.
You could do so. Like if you get the right coach with him, like you can turn him into a Hall of Famer.
Yep.
Tyron Smith was a lot more refined, obviously, coming out of USC, but still.
Another name that I would compare to him would be like Orlando Brown Jr. Like just a punisher that maybe you're not always going to get that. Like you're not going to get this refined player, but whether a tackle or a guard, you could just stick him at the guy across from him and expect some decent results. He'd need practice, but he is a talent, no question, that I think can play in the league. And in a whole world of getting helmets confused for talent, that's a shot, unfortunately, at Justin Ross. Like he's a guy that I would look at and say he can play. He can flat out play.
People
and if he was
Justin
the pick
Ross
anywhere, he's somebody
Mahomes.
to get excited about. What?
Some people forget Justin Ross went before Patrick Mahomes, along with Mitch Trubisky. but nobody forgets that.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately.
Mitch
Speaking
is
of,
better. He went 2 overall.
obviously.
Is it segue time,
s-
Q?
Yeah, speaking of the Bears, we got this graphic switched up. Out of these prospects that were labeled by certain websites as guys that the Bears will be targeting, who kind of stands out to you?
So the first thing that I have to say is that I don't want the Bears to pick at 39. I think 39
Yeah.
is a good pick. Don't get me wrong.
I think
But
it's a great pick to trade.
That's the thing. What I have heard when I talk to people that are close enough to the industry to where they're not just guessing, what they talked about is that there is nothing more important than those first 10 picks in the second round. Because after the first round, everybody goes to sleep, right? You have a new board. You take 32 names off of it, and there it is. It's you and your guys. And if there's somebody there, like Tevin Jenkins was last year, you have only got so many picks to trade for him. And you know the teams that want to come up or might take him outright. So that leaves these teams.
It's too bad that Ryan Pace is ahead of us in the second round.
Hey, so far, he'd love to give the Bears resources.
Yeah.
He's signing all his former Bears. But
yeah.
all that to say that I think 39 is a really good pick. And the hard part for Bears fans is that there is no trade without a trade partner. And that means that there is going to have to be somebody that falls that there's a decent chance Bears fans want.
Yeah.
Does that mean Sky Moore? Maybe. Does that mean Jahan Dotson? Does that mean, dare I say it, Chris Olave, Tyler Lindbaum?
Mm-hmm.
Does it mean a player that the Bears need may show up there that they then have to trade out? Does it mean, be still my beating heart, the Bears dangle Christian Watson and get that trade back with a New England or an Arizona or something that plants them firmly in the mid 50s, but gets them a third round pick? It might, but
I mean, I would even go further than say it might. I think it will. Like if they're trading back, there's going to be someone there who we are going to wish that we had. I don't have any doubt in my mind about that. It's just whether you can get someone close to equal later.
So my only hope, and I know you had me talking about this guy later, but my only hope is that a guy like Arnold Ebiketie, if I'm pronouncing that right, like the edge rusher from Penn State, that it can be a position that we can say, I hear you, but I am willing to pass on that if it gets me what I want.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that it's a linebacker, that it's a corner, that it's a safety. Somebody like Dax Hill would be another option that the Bears don't need. It won't bleed them if they don't get them. But if it's a wide receiver that they have to pass up on, there's going to be a lot of angry Bears fans.
Yeah.
All the way.
Well, I mean,
until pick 48.
I think no matter what you do, you're going to get some angry Bears fans. So, all right. Well, let's go ahead and jump in on some of these guys and just start ripping them away. We kind of blew through your background at the start, but we'll just pick it up at the end of the episode, before you jump off.
Let me get one more thing off with the Bears real fast.
Yeah.
So the Bears offensive, for anybody who doesn't know the Bears, and if you do, you'll probably hear this enough. The Bears' whole team is so full of holes right now that you've got this beautiful clay where you might almost be able to go true best player available and get away with it if they didn't need help on offense so bad, because the one player that they really need answers on, or at least better answers on, is Justin Fields, their now sophomore quarterback. You can't really do that by fixing your defense. And in my opinion, I personally think drafting defense signals the beginning of a championship run. It's just my opinion, but defenders, let's use the Cowboys as an example, right?
Went all defense last year.
And Micah Parsons can immediately play. That's a very common story.
Yeah, Kelvin Joseph looks like he's capable. Deshaun Wright looks like he can step in a pinch.
Yep. And it may take a couple years for a Michael Gallup to really find his footing in the league, but a lot of these defenders jump in and can make an impact pretty much immediately.
Yeah.
So to me, if I'm the Bears, that means that this day 2 needs to be very offense heavy. I also think Bears fans need to understand what they need, because I actually think, and I put out a tweet earlier about this today, that they're starting to underrate Darnell Mooney. And I don't take too kindly to that, because he's a much better player than people give him credit for. He's just 185 pounds wet. And every time people watch NFL highlights, they see 220-pound Goliath receivers catching the ball over the top of somebody, which I get. But we are not far removed from Tyreek Hill being the best player in the NFL, from Antonio Brown being the best player in the NFL. There, Cooper Kupp, who is like a clear Z receiver.
Had the best receiving season since Megatron.
Yep. I mean, I'm with any Bears fan that if it was possible to add a Jamar Chase type talent, I would love to. Yeah. It's not realistic. But what the Bears do have is a Z receiver that they can build around. And for anybody who doesn't know what that is, just a very quick explanation. There are rules in the NFL about who can line up along the line and how many guys can't. And the guys that you'll see go in motion are guys that are off the line of scrimmage. These, like this foot off the line of scrimmage, is really important because it makes it a lot harder for defensive players to press your guy. It's a little bit harder to play press coverage on somebody that's either moving or a little further off the line. And that means that you can play smaller, maybe more like movement oriented players, because you don't have to worry so much about getting those guys getting punched in the chest by Richard Sherman and their route getting disrupted. On the other hand, you've got the X receiver, which is not quite a tight end, but often a very big receiver that's going to handle some blocking assignments, not a ton, but some, and they need to be able to play press and win on the outside. And the Bears specifically need that. And right now, the draft board, with the way things are showing up, there are a lot of really good Z receivers that are falling to them. And I don't understand why people want to keep putting Sky Moore on the Bears. I think Sky Moore is awesome. I think his feet are clearly super good. But when you think, in my opinion anyways, about Sky Moore translating to the NFL, I see him as a slot receiver. Like, I don't even know if he's a true Z receiver. He's a lot smaller.
I think he's a slot, absolutely.
Than I think people realize. And that's like 39 is really high to take slot receiver, unless you think that guy's the man, especially with somebody like Calvin Austin that you could potentially get that's equally electric in the slot. Everybody does.
I'm glad you actually mentioned that, because I saw you in some debates the other day about, what's the difference between Sky Moore and Calvin Austin? Are they the same player, but one you can get around later?
I think Sky Moore's, if you're asking me, are you asking me?
I'm asking you.
Okay, so I think Calvin Austin is obviously pretty diminutive, and that scares a lot of people away. There are plenty of folks that are like, you can't be successful in the NFL at 5'7", you just can't. I mean, you got to remember that the NFL, despite what many of us on the outside may think, is a land of lists. It's a land of, at linebacker, we don't take anybody with less than 38-inch arms. It's a land of, well, if we're going to draft an X receiver, they need to be at least 6'3", they need to be at least 215, they need to run at least a 4.45. Like, there's tons of these qualifications and restrictions and the way teams do things, like what we've seen as a clear linebacking emphasis in Indianapolis over the last couple of years. It's not an accident. They keep drafting really long guys, and it sounds like, from what we're hearing, that may not even have been like an Eberflus thing. That, like, the not only Roquan Smith, but the help me out, Q, the free agent they just signed, Morrow, is that his name?
Yeah, Nick Morrow.
His arms aren't long enough, so it might not be an Eberflus preference.
I ran numbers on the linebackers that Eberflus brought into Indy, and it seemed to me like he definitely preferred length, or Indy preferred length, but it wasn't a deal breaker for them by any means. They drafted guys who were average, slightly below average. Like, if they found traits in a guy who didn't have long arms, they kept him on their list.
And I think that, going back to your earlier question, like the difference between Sky Moore and Calvin Austin. Well, I'll bring up a similar comparison because I think this matters. Christian Watson versus Alec Pierce. They are not the same thing. That is not what I'm about to build towards. But one of them played in the FCS, and it's extremely hard to find any bad film of him because of how often they ran the ball. They did not pass the ball. And he was such a man among boys, he being Christian Watson, that it's just hard to find him doing anything wrong because he didn't have to. Like, he beat guys downfield with ease. He dropped some passes, which, bummer. But he was so open, so obviously good that I think sometimes, in fact, when you play at a small school, it can almost become a boon. And yes, I'm in this case alluding to our man from Western Michigan, because when you so toast guys that won't sniff the league, you look really, 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 really good. And that's not to say Sky Moore won't be, but the name that keeps coming to mind is Rondale Moore. Rondale Moore was an electric super athlete. Nobody asked any questions of him. Came into the league. He had about 432 yards in a relatively good, but definitely not amazing season. And if Rondale Moore in the slot doesn't just blow up, then obviously this is a harder position than I think we're giving it credit for. And it may be a few too many.
He should have gone berserk.
He should have, but he didn't. And so what that tells me is that I think that there is such a thing as getting a little bit too excited about pocket rocket, small, fast guys, or guys that break really well and have really fast feet. Yes, all of that matters. Definitely.
I mean,
but also
the best example of what you're saying right now is just turn on Tavon Austin's highlight tape at West Virginia.
Right.
Yeah.
And then look what he did in the league.
You have to think not just what is this guy good at, but how does he win in the league and who does he win against? And while I'm not trying to pretend that I have all the answers on a guy like Sky Moore, I will tell you that I have a feeling it is surprisingly difficult for a 6-foot corner or even like a 5'10" corner to press a 5'7" human being. Like, punching down is quite literally difficult. And so
we got feet like lightning. It's
right.
harder.
It's not to say that Calvin Austin's a better prospect, but if I told you guys that you had to choose between Sky Moore at 39 or Calvin Austin at 71, does the value start to make a little bit of sense?
Makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
I don't think Calvin Austin's dropping to 71, but in this draft, I have no idea what's going to happen because I feel like we're 75 to about 110 deep. So anything could happen.
The other thing worth remembering is that it isn't fans doing the drafting, right? If you gave fans the ability to run the draft, I think we'd be through 13 receivers by pick 32. Like, people love receivers. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, the value is pretty
it's one of the clearest positions to see talent at. It's one of the easy, like, I shouldn't say easiest, but it's one of the more clear spots to see where guys will win.
Smoothly as anything else in college football to the pros, because I mean the only true difference is like who's guarding you and quarterback. Like the same routes they run in college, like you might be able to crisp them up, but like they're pretty refined coming in. They've been doing it since they were 11 years old at this point, with all the academies and stuff nowadays. Like there's not a whole lot like outside of option routes. Like you kind of know what you're getting at that point.
And with some of these guys, I actually do think, believe it or not, you get a slightly more expanded route tree once they move to the pros. College offenses, you see this almost a little too often. Not only are they vanilla, but they'll teach their guys like literally 4 or 5 routes, especially on the outside, because they just don't need any more than that. It's like, I'd rather you get good at these 4, and then the NFL takes them and they go, so you're not going to be able to win with a go, a curl, a dig, and a smoke. Like, we need a little more than that. So let's start adding, and, they can work around the clock. The main reason that I bring up all this receiver stuff is because the Bears need not just an X receiver. I think they need a vertical threat. I personally think that while Darnell Mooney's really fast, the Z receiver is especially electric on the inside intermediate of the field, where they can work between basically the line of scrimmage and the 25-yard line, and maybe they'll take you vertical, maybe, but more often than not, they're going to hook out and around and in. Think Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett is like the perfect Z receiver to think of in this sense.
He's also perfect for like a cover 2 beater, going like straight between the 2 safeties. But outside of beating cover 2, he's perfect in that inside 30 range.
What about a guy like Khalil Shakir? Does he fit that type of mold, or is he what type of spot do you see him fitting in at?
Shakir, and I have no idea if that's correct, by the way. I'm just shooting from the hip.
I said Shaker, you said Shakir. Meet
Yeah.
somewhere in the middle. It all works.
Khalil Shakir is one of the funniest players that I've seen in a little while because he tested at a 4.43, and I do not see that on tape. Like, I mean, I can't tell. He literally looks like an anime character running around with ankle weights, like just based on the way that he moves. He doesn't even pick his knees up. It's not that he's slow, it's that he's methodical. And he is one of the smartest. He'll be a slot at the NFL. And he is one of the smartest anti-zone receivers I've seen in a long time.
Yeah.
I mean,
now,
like
by methodical, do you mean like almost robotic, or methodical as in like detailed?
I would say detailed.
Okay.
Is a better way. His foot frequency isn't crazy insane. It's not like you're seeing pop, 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 pop movement. But when he wants to turn, he doesn't waste any movement to get there. And what I think is most impressive in the 2 games I watched of Shakir, I guess 2.5, because I did see him all over Chad Muma's tape, but I have never seen him run himself into coverage, which, to make it clear on what I mean, there's a really bad habit that a lot of receivers have where against zone coverage in particular, they'll kind of lose sense for where they are on the field and take something that comes across the field. Maybe it's a drag route, maybe it's a dig route, and they'll run from open into coverage. And if the quarterback doesn't get there on time, it looks like the quarterback missed the moment, but the receiver can definitely help out by slowing down, or I mean, even stopping, like, or once they get to that open area. And Shakir in particular, what I've seen, it's not just short routes, like even on deeper routes, even when he was on the outside, which I don't think he projects super well at the NFL level, when he found himself in a zone pocket, it was as if, I'm sure you guys have seen those NFL dots that people go crazy over.
Oh,
it
would have been dots.
Yeah.
Oh, everybody does. It would have been as if you could draw a measurement line between like the nearest 2 defenders' dots, and he was consistently the furthest possible point away from those dots until he got the ball.
Yeah.
It's really impressive.
Yeah. Everything's right on top of him.
Right. It's really impressive watching the way he wins, not because he's spectacular. I mean, I would compare Shakir to Alec Pierce to say they are completely different. Alec Pierce is this raw ball of explosive athletic talent.
Yeah.
The guy can barely keep his feet under him half the time. In the 3 games that I've got recorded, because I'm putting together a breakdown, because I think Bears fans really can use Alec Pierce to understand the problem that they're trying to solve. I watched him fall 8 times in 3 games. Like he is the all gas, no brakes burner. And if anything,
like the Energizer Bunny.
I would even go so far as to say he's kind of a one-trick pony. But that one trick is ridiculously valuable because when that one trick is smoking guys deep, well, all you got to do is mess up twice, and the guy took you for 200 yards. I mean, probably not 200, but you get the idea.
Well, like your Gabriel Davis.
Gabriel Davis is a perfect answer.
Yeah.
Like I would say that Darnell Mooney is looking for his Gabriel Davis compliment, and Alec Pierce is not, in my opinion, a holistic enough receiver to be taken round 2. But also, I could understand if the Bears got ants in their pants if they did pull off a trade down and took either him or the aforementioned like Tyler Smith or something at 48, just to make sure they got him. Because if Christian Watson's off the board, it's not like the draft is loaded with these big, fast guys that play on the outside. The comparison that I keep making, weirdly enough, because I feel like people kind of start to compare players to people that they look like, but Alec Pierce strikes me very similarly to DK Metcalf, who's a lot more limited than I think some people want to think that he is. When you watch Metcalf's tape, he, like we talked about at the top of the show, he wins quick, or he doesn't win at all. He wins on deep routes, and he looks electric when he does. I don't think Pierce is going to be the yards after catch runner that DK is, though maybe he could develop a little of that game. Like, of all the people in the NFL, regardless of what I may say about him, DK Metcalf is probably top 5. I don't want them running at me. Like, in the league.
Absolutely.
Like in the whole, like, if you paid me $1 million and I had to tackle an NFL player, DK is one of those few that I'd be like, it's not worth it.
Keep the money. But hey, Robert, we got a break for an ad real quick. So if you want to just stick around, we'll get that ad played and enjoy a quick sponsor from
To start off your spring cleaning, use the Manscaped Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer. to get the most precise shave of your hedges. Did we mention it's waterproof as well? No need to worry about watering your grass with this tool. Equipped with an LED light, so you know it'll be a major asset to the new shower routine.
And also, did you know that the start of spring also marks the start of Testicular Cancer Awareness Month in April? Manscaped has partnered with Testicular Cancer Society to bring awareness to testicular cancer, men's health, and early cancer detection. So we're here to save the balls, gentlemen.
Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code SHAVINGPOINTS at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code SHAVINGPOINTS at manscaped.com. It's time to throw out your old hygiene habits and upgrade your life. Save the balls.
Save the balls. Absolutely. Get yourself Manscaped.
We are back. Let's go ahead and move on to this next prospect we got here. Let's see who we got. Cupcake.
JT baby. It's JT Woods.
Yeah. I knew I had to put a few Baylor guys on here for you, Robert. So I actually know very little about JT. I haven't been into him outside of what's in this graphic. So sell me on JT Woods.
So I personally think he's awesome. I think he's a thoughtful cover two safety that plays really, really fast. And that's really key when it comes to safety, because let's put it this way. I think that there are too many people that can get lost in whatever position you're talking about into what you're trying to measure. And with a safety, you want to take, let's call it like a quotient of your aggregate reaction time and your foot speed. How long does it take you to get from throw or maybe even just reaction to the place that you need to be, right? Kyle Hamilton basically runs around with like clairvoyance. He has a crazy reaction time that makes up for the fact that he's not the fastest 40, so he gets there faster than somebody else. Eddie Jackson runs around with similar clairvoyance. No matter how many Bears fans,
there's instincts, that feeling of understanding, recognizing from film where they need to be.
Yep. You don't need to be a superstar track athlete, but JT is, and he's got experience working in a thoughtful defense. So he's quick inside of he's quick when it comes to his actual movement. He's got real experience inside of a thoughtful cover two defense that isn't just stand back there and stop anything that comes your way, I guess. But the really complicated thing here when it comes to Woods, and this is something that needs to be stated, is that there's no position, I think, more complicated to evaluate than safety, because I would swear to you guys up and down, there are like 28 or more different ways that NFL teams deploy safeties in the NFL. It can even vary on a team to team, defense to defense, coverage call to coverage call basis. And
as Bears fans, we saw it last year with Eddie. He was used in so many different ways last year.
Yep.
And as I started jumping into the film and even watching your sessions on YouTube, it was like you saw all these different ways that they chose to use him. And it's impressive when you're asking a guy to do that much.
The idea that Eddie Jackson, just soapbox real fast, can cover TJ Hawkinson remotely well is flabbergasting. Safeties are not supposed to do that kind of thing. For crying out loud, I don't know why Sean Desai decided to let him play some actual slot corner. It was stupid. That's a terrible way to use was an instinctive player. But Eddie had the athleticism to do it, which is to his credit, even if it's not useful, if that makes sense. But the point is that I have to make it clear that the most complicated part about JT Woods is that he is very specifically a cover two safety. That's his fit. He's kind of soft. I love him. And a friend of mine, Brandon Robinson, has completely sold me on you have to grade a DB before anybody catches the ball, before you then get a sense for who the DB is when they need to make a tackle, because that first phase controls a lot more about where the quarterback goes with the ball. How are they going to play it? It's not so much about interceptions as it is about, let's call it, flight control. right? And if a player's out there getting lost, but hey, at least they can tackle, that's unhelpful, because all that means is that they'll be cleaning up 15-yard gains all game long. And Bears fans saw that with Tashawn Gibson, who I personally think was a consistent coverage liability. JT won't be that. And he does come downhill better than I think people give him credit for, but he's definitely not somebody who's just yearning to hit somebody. And as a safety, I think that can be misunderstood. I think that if he played, the Bears are one of the teams that I think he would fit really well in, because while a lot of people think that I don't know why people think this. I think it's just old school thinking that you need to pair a coverage guy with a hitter. I can't help but think that in a Bears type defense where you had two safeties that were consistently rolling around disguising, maybe you roll one up, maybe you leave two back, maybe you shift one into the middle of the field and play something like cover one, cover three robber. Like, there are all these kinds of ways that you could manipulate your safeties, but you need guys that can create that air traffic control sensation. JT is one of them, even if he is basically min-maxed in the way that he's able to do it. And so he's not going to give you a ton of hitting help. You're going to need to live with some inconsistencies in terms of downhill tackling. And you need to make sure that he's good on the whiteboard, because that's the kind of stuff that we don't ever hear about. I can't tell if Aranda's system just made him look good, but safety's, to me at least, too hard a position to play. Number two, I love that weakness, that he freelances too much in coverage. I will live and die with safeties that try to make a play, because there's way too many people out there that, we call it guarding grass, will just sit in a zone and quote unquote do the right thing, but get burned all the same. And that to me doesn't help. So
I'm with you on that. Honestly, when I found that as a weakness on a few different scouting reports, I was like, I mean, it's a weakness, but it's also like, if he's right, it's not.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the Trevon Diggs argument. It's like, yeah, he gives up big plays, but he gets 11 picks. Like, I'll take the 11 picks for the big plays all day. But I'm not too familiar with Woods. I watched a lot of Big 12, so I'm sure I've seen him play. I didn't really register his name. Where is he being like mocked around? Like early third, like second, like.
Oh, that has been where you guys are going to ask me. You told me you're going to ask me later about sleepers, which I had to do digging on. I mean, there's no weirder question to me, because if you'd asked me around the Senior Bowl season, I had all these names that are suddenly 5th round picks, 4th round picks, 3rd round picks, 1st round picks. Yeah. And I'm like, people thought Devontae Wyatt was like a mid-third, like during the Senior Bowl, and I was like, I don't know who's smoking what. That's ridiculous. and now it sounds like normal to be like he's a first rounder. But Woods went from a 7th rounder maybe to suddenly mid 5th ish, and I think
so he's a mid round guy. Okay, yeah. So I was just trying to get a feel for like if he's one of those guys who your team picks in the late 3rd or mid 4th, and you maybe haven't heard of him or something like that, like upside is tremendous there.
I personally think the upside on, and this is just me guessing, right? We have yet to see any Baylor Bears move into the NFL right now, and I haven't been doing draft study long enough to know if this is a thing. But my guess is, because Dave Aranda is one of the
best defensive
he's not just one of the best defensive coaches, but he's on the cutting edge of how he does it. Like Matt Rule is much more, we're going to teach the fundamentals. We're going to try real hard. Rah, rah. We're going to play old school football, and we're going to nail it. Hey, he did turn out an 11-2 season I don't dislike Matt Rule.
I just love Dave Aranda.
I do too.
I think he's incredible.
My thought is, I can't help but think that there is an advantage to drafting players from teams that you know that the defensive head coach has taught them well. So I'm really curious to see how a lot of these Baylor Baylor defensive backs in particular do, because whereas there's a Bears draft pick that finally got off the team recently, his name's Deion Bush, and he had some really, really fun hitting tape at Miami, but that was sort of where it ended. Right? It's not like he was a natural in coverage. He was a safety that hit really hard.
Good hitting tape in college doesn't necessarily translate to hitting in the NFL either. I mean, that's something we never really saw with Bush.
No. And my thought that I'm really curious to see is, because I know we're going to come up and talk about Pitre here in a little bit. Like, I'm very curious to see how these Baylor DBs do, because to a man, they're not the greatest athletes in football, but they're very good, disciplined, game-ready football players. And I think that matters on the defensive side of the ball. And that's how you end up with guys like Cam Chancellor and Richard Sherman massively outplaying their draft status, because I personally believe to this day, people really misunderstand how to evaluate defensive backs and go looking maybe a little bit too much for athlete and missing the core of what makes a football player a football player.
Absolutely.
Well, let's jump right in Jalen Pitre, right?
Mhm.
Jaden, did you have something to add?
I was going to say I was just going to transition to the next guy.
Okay. Well, Jalen Pitre it is, his teammate. Let's hear what you got on him, Robert. I am very interested to hear what you got to say about him, because he is a tough prospect to get my hands around.
I feel so much better about JT Woods than I do about Pitre, because the best part about JT Woods is that it's impossible for me to be wrong. Oh no, I'm high on a 5th round safety that came out of my alma mater. Like, whoa, what if I'm wrong? Who cares? Not important. But Jalen Pitre, the complicated piece about this is that this guy didn't just play well. He flat out dominated as a senior. I mean, if you turn on any tape, you're going to see a guy playing a Saban position called the star, right? It's a fusion between an inside linebacker and a slot corner that Saban's
which you're saying a
known for
lot in the
deploying.
NFL now.
You do. And he was killer at it. If they tracked run stops in college, he might have had 35 or 40 personal run stops. I mean, he was,
So I recently got the PFF college sub, and he was up there with linebackers on run stops. It was part of the article I put out last week.
You put it on here on strengths. He is a madman, and he's got great coverage instincts. He does so many things well. ... But he's not a great bag peddler. He's only so good out of the half turn. And he's definitely not a corner. He's definitely not a safety. So what is he?
Yeah.
And
that's always a tricky question.
I personally have no faith in defensive coordinators to actually use him well. He's too good to fall out of the 3rd round, right? Like a lot of people.
What are you going to do with him?
That's the thing. If you don't build your defense around him, you will waste him. And that's a tough ask, because a lot of these defensive coordinators, they've got their system. This is what we're doing. This is what I know how to coach. This is how we're going to do it. And unless you've got a defense, ironically, again, the Bears are not a bad fit because they rely so heavily on their nickel corner that you could, in theory, you could fuse the Sam linebacker in the nickel corner a little bit and shift your safeties, especially if you did have 2 primarily coverage safeties, right? Like, say that normally you had, like, in the Colts case, they had Kenny Moore, who's a coverage specialist, and a lot of times they'd roll a safety into the box. Well, with Pitre, if you played this role, you could use him as your safety in the box when you wanted that run help, and play 2 coverage safeties and do more disguise stuff on the back end, and then basically just play a little bit of CYA anytime that somebody took Pitre vertical and make sure that you had a safety backing him up. You could do that. Like, there are ways that you could use him, and he'd be a beast. He'd be a one-of-a-kind player out there, because, I mean, seriously, when people are looking for, like, a star in the NFL, like, what kind of player could I comp to that? Jalen Ramsey. He plays star, which is nobody's Jalen Ramsey. Nobody. Nobody's Jalen Ramsey. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens with Pitre. I personally think that he is a live hand grenade. He could be dangerous if thrown well, and he could blow up in your hand if you're not paying attention. And so at this point, it's just a matter of how the draft falls and where he goes. I don't think his tape, it's possible to walk away not salivating over what he could be.
Over the possibilities.
I guarantee you there's somebody out there where the GM would take him and the defensive coordinator would take a look at his tape and they'd be like, he'd probably be a pretty good, strong safety. And they'd just completely misplay him as like a normal safety instead of getting any of that in the box benefit.
So do you think he gets any benefit from being a goldfish owner?
Is he a goldfish owner?
Yeah, so we were talking to Dave Aranda a couple weeks ago, and he told us that Pitre had a goldfish named Bernard that he like. Anytime you go to his house, he shows you his goldfish, and he just gets so confused that more people don't own goldfish.
That's awesome.
And I was just wondering if that translates to the NFL or not.
What I can tell you, jokes about goldfish aside, because unfortunately I'm not going to answer that question, but I'm going to tell a different story. I don't know if this is clear, but so Baylor infamously had this massive scandal with Art Briles that completely shook everything up. Like, I'm sure. Well, do you really need to know? But so they had to completely reorg the program. They fired the chancellor. It was dark, dark days at Baylor, right as I was graduating college. And the entire like class, the recruiting class left, except for Jalen Pitre, who for some reason remained committed to Baylor. So I
Bernard was already there.
If that speaks to his character, but every single other commit vacated except for him. And then he was there during the Rule era. He didn't declare after Rule left. He stuck it out with Aranda, learned a lot. Aranda put him to use, and he shined. The fact that, like you see there, he's a late bloomer doesn't surprise me. He was being used more as like a traditional corner in the Rule scheme, and he's fine, but he's not good at it. If that makes sense.
It limited what he could really show.
Mm-hmm.
It just goes to show you what could happen if, like you said, they just try to put him in like a box position in the NFL. They don't try to use him to his full ability. Like Matt Rule had him just playing corner. It's like that's not going to work for a guy like that.
Right. And I can't tell you for certain that he's going to be a stud. I can tell you that apparently he has just an insane work ethic, as proved through the fact that he didn't quit in the face of clear and obvious adversity and ended up being able to be part of a Baylor Sugar Bowl team that I think shocked everybody.
Yeah. Throwing it to another prospect who, just has guys salivating over what he could be is Abraham Lucas.
Yeah. I'm one of those people, but man, I've gotten some conflicting reports. And by that, I mean, I took a look at what Thorne had to say about him, and I took a look at what a friend of mine, Brandon Robinson, had to say about him, and both of them thought he was flat out bad. So maybe I watched the wrong game. I'm more than willing to admit that there are some times where any scout is just going to see somebody wrong. And I am at the point where I don't trust my own eyes, because I think Abraham Lucas can really move. I think his movement testing is insane.
What you're saying actually surprises me, because I think he probably has one of the highest ceilings of any of the non-first round tackles. And you can't teach the pass pro stuff that comes natural to him.
I agree.
He just does it. But he doesn't know how to rumble.
My eyes see everything you're saying too, and then Brandon Thorne's out here saying the guy's a 5th round pick in his eyes. Like, such bad reviews that I sit there and I'm like, whoa, my gosh.
What am I missing?
Yeah.
Like,
and Brandon Thorne's a guy who I'm not going to push up against either.
Exactly.
He's as good as it gets.
Like, so it's the sort of thing where I'm sitting there saying, like, at the minimum, I need to watch 2 more games of tape before I talk about how good he is. Other people that I know have talked about Raymond, whose first name escapes me, starts with the B. Bernard Raymond.
Just like the goldfish.
Just like the goldfish, yeah.
Yep. who could very well be there and is a little bit more the player that I think people want Lucas to be, who is a big guy that moves really well. And like you're saying,
where Raymond scares me more, though, is he doesn't have the length, and he's 25 in September.
Yikes! Oh, yikes! That makes
a lot of sense. That's where I mean, he was a converted wide receiver, tight end when he got to college. Dang. Converted from tight end to offensive tackle. He's put on 60 pounds in the last I want to say 2 years. He's only been playing offensive line for 2 years.
Okay.
And that's where, I think his upside's a lot more limited because of all of that.
The bright side for the Bears is that, first of all, I need to make this really clear, Q. This is going to sound awful. I don't really care about upside with offensive linemen. I wish I did, but I really just need them to be good and not bad.
Just be confident.
They don't have to be great. They really don't. Just be good and be good for a little while. And
just
so
keep
somebody
Justin
like Raymond,
upright.
Yeah, exactly. And not to mention, I don't even really care what position they play. The goofy part about somebody like Tyler Smith is that I'm drafting him to throw him into the room. Like, sure, if Larry Borum ends up a swing tackle, that's perfectly fine because good depth is good depth. But at the same time, I'll also be the first to say that the Bears need a guard. Borum's not that guard. I don't really want to shift Tevin Jenkins to guard if I don't have to. So if somebody like Raymond comes into the league, you mentioned he has short arms. If they just play him at guard and he sits at guard for 6 years, I'm fine with it, especially if the Bears have traded down to get that pick. So at this stage, like I said, I wish that I could trust any of my own eye tape with Lucas. Because I have seen him move. I have seen him win on overtake blocks. I think he looks very, very, very competent in pass pro. I also have seen so many nuking reviews. It would be one thing if people said, late third rounder. Like, that's something where I can be like, okay, so we agree about the player caliber, but maybe not the specific slot, right? But fifth round to me says this guy's a complete lottery pick. And that's not the guy that I've been seeing. To me, that's more along the like Darian Kennard kind of player who to me is just a big dude that people call an offensive lineman. Daniel Falele being another one. And to me, those guys are a way more often misses than hits. But at this stage, again, if it was me, just given how nervous those recent reviews have gotten me, I would probably take one of the receivers just to avoid having to give an opinion one way or another.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's get to one last guy.
Positive.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Arnold Ebiketie. I think you said earlier. I'm not sure. I need to put phonetic spelling on these cards, honestly.
Right.
But what do you think of this guy? I know you mentioned him when looking at some of Petit Frere. I don't know how you say his name either, but his tape as someone you were a little surprised by.
Oh, yeah, because he's a beast. I mean, he really is.
Yeah.
He is everything but bend, is what I was joking. Like, he can win inside. I've watched him convert speed to power. Like, I'm sure with all these things with weaknesses. I mean, can I be real? The hardest thing about scouting an edge rusher is that people will tell me, or I'll see on reports, he's inconsistent about this. And I'm like, the whole position is inconsistent.
Yeah, nobody's consistent at edge.
Your position is chaos.
Yeah, I've watched Khalil Mack get blocked a lot more than I've watched him punch through the line of scrimmage, and then he'll have the highest pressure rate in football. And I'm like, come on, you're killing me. Like, I love positions that are a little bit more stable, and edge isn't that. Edge is if you win 3 times in a game and you convert on 2 of those, you're getting defensive player of the game. Like, out of 60 snaps. It's hilarious how this position works. And I can tell you that against a third round considered player who I don't think is all that good, in Nicholas Petit Ferrere or whatever it is, he won inside a lot. And he won inside with relative ease. And then in his game against Michigan, he did the same thing. He's got a nasty inside move due to sudden hands and basically the ability to sell outside with a head fake and then dip inside very, very quickly. He doesn't have a ton of burst off the line, yes, but also that get off is just really inconsistent. At one point, I thought it was a 2-point stance, 3-point stance thing where he did better out of a 3-point stance, but it happened there too. I actually think he struggles to focus, which I'm really, really reading in. But there is a lot of times where you can tell he's talking to a defensive player behind him or he's looking at something else. It's not like he's distracted. I think it's that he's taking on a bit more mental load than we realized, and therefore he's late to the snap, which for edge,
that's interesting.
You really don't want to be. Like, and so
it's the last thing you want to be as edge.
Right. I'm curious as to whether a little bit of coaching helps him out. He's not the run defender that his power says he should be. Like, I've watched him consistently establish clear dominance over his offensive lineman, get into his running gap, and then just fall over. Like, I normally the guys finish the play there. And so he's still helping out in that he denies a running lane or he pushes the running back somewhere else, but he's not somebody who's making plays in the running game the way that we've seen elite edges do. And like I said, he'd be a first rounder if he could bend around an edge. He can't, but he's fast, he's strong, his inside move's useful, and honestly, when it comes to pass rusher, people will take just about anything. I mean, pass rusher is a weird position because when I think of most teams and most pass rushers, they take somebody in the top 15 and then they don't touch the position for literally 10 years. Like Nick Bosa, TJ Watt, Joey Bosa, Brian Burns, Khalil Mack, Robert Quinn, JJ Watt. It's not like the names change because there's just not that many really good ones. So he seems to me like a very standard second round pass rusher. I don't think he's your franchise pass rusher. I think he's a good rotational guy, but I also think that personally that like this is just a complete nobody asked for it thesis, but I do think that the edge position in general isn't near as valuable as it once was. I think that the league is slow to catch up to it, but that interior players like Chris Jones, like Aaron Donald, nobody will talk about it, but Akeem Hicks was this guy in 2018.
Very much so.
Like, I mean, ferocious interior dominators at the 2 or 3 tech or 4 tech spot are making twice the impact that Von Millers and TJ Watts and like all these other phenomenal edge rushers are. Not for lack of trying, not for lack of skill, but because at least to me, it seems like West Coast poison has started to filter into every single offense out there. And between play action handoffs and quick like bubble screens, edge rushers just take too long. Like they physically take too long. Interior
pressure is like become like the most like sought after thing for defenses at this point because quarterbacks are getting more and more mobile every year. So with somebody coming off the edge, you can either step up or spin out fairly easily. When you have pressure right in your chest, like there ain't nowhere to go at that point.
It really makes evaluating a player like this complicated because it's not that I think Arnold is bad at all. It's that I don't think he's a Hall of Famer. And right now it almost feels like if you're not a Hall of Famer, you're pretty good. Don't get me wrong. Or I think Josh Sweat is on there. And I find that so interesting because Sweat's a great example. He plays for the Commanders, or at least did a couple years ago, right?
Montez Sweat?
I'm thinking of the right player.
I think he's still
Montez
there.
Sweat.
Isn't he, Jaden?
Montez Sweat.
Or no, Josh Sweat. Josh Sweat's with Philly.
Gotcha. Let me stick to Montez.
Montez is in with the Commanders, former R words.
They're pretty similar players, though, honestly.
And I think, if memory serves, Montez, who might have been who I'm thinking of, was a second-round pick as well.
Montez was a first-round pick.
Was he a first?
I think late first.
Yeah. Because the point being that he's not a dominator. He'll make you a play. He will go get you one. You know, it's not like he's bad, and certainly he'll hold his run gap fairly well. And goodness knows there are just not a lot of Travis Gibsons out there. Like, it's very rare that you get a 4th or a 5th rounder that actually matters on the edge position. That's incredibly hard to find. But in lieu of that, you end up with guys like Arnold here, who, again, I can compliment the player enough, but a very good player. Like that broad jump, I think you can see it. Let's put it this way, Q. Sometimes he'll have a false step off the line, but that 3rd step is always really, really strong, no matter what. Like, he will explode. He is agile. He is strong. He puts up a lot of strength when he explodes through guys' chests, and he's got control of their chests when he does it. We live in a league where guys are getting the ball out within 2.5 seconds, and it's hard to get there. And so he'll make you a huge play here and there. He definitely doesn't have crazy bend, which really only matters when somebody gets interior pressure anyways. But if he can actually bring that inside move with him to the NFL level effectively, he'll get his. He may not be a 15-sack guy, but he'll get you 7 or 8. And at the very least, not make you feel like you got no pass rush at all.
Yeah.
All right.
So, quick clarification: Montez was 26th.
Perfect. Great to know.
So just real quick here, we asked you
Yep.
to think about your top 5 sleepers in the draft. We don't gotta jump super in depth into them unless you want to,
I can
but
go
let's roll
1
through
through
them.
5. So sleeper here, in my opinion, means somebody that I think might start that isn't talked about as a starter. So I decided that my cutoff was it can't be a top 100 player, right? It's got to be
Mhm.
somebody outside of that. I hope that that's fair because
That's wonderful.
as much as I would love to reach and pull out somebody ranked 250, all my guys keep getting stolen. I can't say Tyquan Thornton anymore, who used to be in the 300s because he went out and ran a fast 40, and suddenly everybody has him on their radar. But so, starting from the top, Max Mitchell, the offensive tackle who played for, if memory serves, the Louisiana
Raging Cajuns.
He is a lot better than people give him credit for. I've never seen somebody that gets what I call like he has longer effective arms than than most tackles. Now, I want to clarify what I mean by that. Most people will look at arm length. As Sean Payton recently tweeted, this league is a first contact league. Being able to strike first is huge. But when people talk about technique, what they're talking about is the ability to time your punch such that you get your whole arm straight and maximize that arm length. If you punch late, it doesn't really matter that your arm is long because it's bent. You are only getting as much as you punched out for. And
you can't lock out on it, and you're meeting something that's coming straight at you at 15 miles an hour and 300 pounds.
And that's where, if you go watch some Tyler Smith film, I have to bring him up again. He's the rare guy that will lock it out after being late.
Yeah,
he's got so much strength in his body that he makes technique look like it doesn't matter until he takes, I'm not kidding, 15 holds in a year. And you're like, okay, we got to cool it, Tyler. We do have to play a clean game here. But all that to say, Mitchell is the opposite. He is a zone offensive tackle that might work at guard, but he's probably a little light in the pants for that. He played at 295 in this last year. Small guy, but he weighed in at 305 at the combine, which has me thinking that he's trying to gain more weight. And I see that as a real positive, because if his frame had stuck that low, he's a depth guy. But if he gains 20 pounds and keeps the speed and agility, because he's fast too, that made him the tackle that he was, because he has a great game against Texas on tape if you go looking for it. I think
I was there live.
Oh, you were there live?
I saw it. I was there. I had the all 22 view from the stands all game.
In the middle of the game, the kid switches from right tackle to left tackle too and picks up where he left off. Like, he's versatile. He can play both sides. He's a wide zone friendly tackle that could probably play a little bit of inside zone, but he's not getting a ton of movement. It's not like he can't play a gap scheme, but I definitely think he'd be zone heavy. And he's somebody that comes to mind purely because it's rare to find a player that good at the position, and he really knows his craft. My second sleeper is somebody that, heck, I haven't even done a full film study on, but I have to mention Kalen Barnes, the number one, the starting corner for Baylor, that fundamentally didn't get talked about because he didn't get thrown at because he was doing a good job. Like, it's funny because I'm a Baylor fan, and I forgot he was on the team there for a little while because he just did not collect targets. Raleigh Tejada did. All of them. And so that's somebody that certainly interests me when he goes out and runs a 4.25 40 and comes from that Aranda scheme. I'm not saying that I'm truly telling you that I don't have a full tape study done on him. So I could completely change my opinion, but he's somebody I've got my eye on because there's too much athletic ability. There's too much good coaching, and there's too many results. I mean, this is a Baylor team that defensively speaking did what most teams couldn't do in the Big 12 and locked out some really, really good offenses as a unit. You can't do that without a good corner. Like when they, if memory serves, they held OU to certainly under 25, but I think maybe even under 20, though you'll have to fact check me on that. And you need cornerbacking talent to play with those wide receivers and the Bears had it. So he's somebody that I would definitely go take a second look at. He is, as my friend EJ Snyder would say, somebody that you find in a conference not known for having that thing. And that's where you can go find a little bit of extra edge because people are going to look for Big Ten. They're going to look for SEC. They're going to look for other conferences outside of the Big 12 for their cornerbacking talent. But Kalen Barnes could be at the very least a solid teamer, but at maybe best depth corner, even maybe like a starter. But again, we'll get there. Next up are a couple guys that I saw shine at the Senior Bowl back in February. That's where this comes from. First is Neil Farrell, who drew so much praise that when I asked Max Mitchell himself, like, who stood out to you in day one's practice, he said, gee, that guy from LSU was unbeatable. This is somebody whose tape is pretty unspectacular. I mean, Neil Farrell is not known for being phenomenal, and he went to the Senior Bowl and just kicked butt. I mean, he's a run-stuffing DT that I think would fit in a lot of systems. He's not outstandingly athletic, but he understands his position really well. I'm curious to see if he'll translate. He very well could be just a good college tackle, and I don't want to pretend that any sleeper at any point is a sure thing. But he played so well at the Senior Bowl and had himself a weekend that if you want to throw some stock in it, go for it. Another guy.
Well, I believe he's got pretty impressive traits for a nose too, like as far as athleticism goes.
That makes sense. I don't know his RAS. Is it like decent or is he, you know what? Let me just live.
I'm just going off memory, but I thought it was a little better than most, because noses are usually in the 2 to 3 range on RAS. I want to say he was somewhere around 6, which for a nose I like.
Is really that bad normally?
Yeah. Like I think John Ridgway out of Arkansas is like a 2. Raz just kind of struggles with the nose tackle because it doesn't separate it out from a 3 tech.
That makes sense because smaller, faster defensive linemen just whoop them is basically what you're saying. I completely get that. So that's good to hear on his part. John Ridgway is going to take number 4 because he was going to be number 5 here, but I'm just going to mention him. When guys can generate power, I pay attention. Right? Yeah. I get it. The nose tackle isn't that valuable, but you got to remember that as far as sleepers go, I think you're looking for the, oh my word. How can I not remember the Boise kid's name that we just drafted, Q? Like, help me out here. He played near the end of the year.
You're talking nose? Kyrus Tonga?
Kyrus Tonga. Thank you.
Okay.
Like, to me, you're looking for those guys in those later rounds. You're looking at positions that aren't important, but you think you can get a decent player there, right? Rotational defensive lineman. People will always think of Madden. They'll think of your starters, but you've got to have solid rotational guys. And when I watched John Ridgway at the Senior Bowl, I saw what I saw on tape, and that's that when he gets going, he is going. He can generate a little bit of interior pressure. He can push guys around. He can take on double teams. He's got some issues. He's a nose. He's not a 3 tech. But I do think that on the defensive line, you got to take that eventually just to get them in your rotation. He's somebody that I would love to take another or closer look at. And the 5th one is a guy from the University of Miami, Ohio. His name is Dominique Robinson. And at the Senior Bowl, he had some great reps. Again, we're talking about a position that I went on a whole diatribe talking about how hard it is to scout edge. And I need to find some tape so that I can actually confirm how this guy played in non-Senior Bowl environments. But in the Senior Bowl, I mean, there was one point where we were watching him. And let's just say there are some guys you look at and you're like, that guy looks like a star. And the first rep in, he whipped right around. I think it was Trevor Penning on the right side, just blew right by him for a clear sack. And
so did Penning come running up and, like fall on top of him after it?
No. I mean, he got by so cleanly. Holy moly. It was, I want to know who this guy is. He's somebody that I want to see another look at because he was, let's put it this way. Not everybody at the Senior Bowl has you fumbling through your electronic roster to try to figure out what their name is. But Dominique Robinson's somebody whose name I came away remembering. And I'm curious as to whether it was just one good rep or a surprisingly solid player.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So before we let you go, is Kayvon Thibodeau really gonna fall out of the top 10 like people are talking?
I don't know. Sometimes it feels like people are making stuff up, and then all of a sudden Laramie Tunsil goes 17 off of a video. What I really want to know, to me, you want to talk dramatic. I want to know what happens to pick number 5. 5 in particular, 2 and 5. Where is Malik Willis going? Is Malik Willis going to Detroit? I think that would make a lot of sense for them.
Yeah. Does Detroit trade?
Like
Out of 2?
They might, but why would you trade for 2 when you could just trade for 5? Like,
Yeah.
In the world of
if Malik Willis is the pick, I absolutely agree with you.
Like, it's, to me, Malik is the only quarterback that I would trust a franchise with this year. And it's because of that top end talent. I mean, this is going to sound so brutal because I know we're talking about like the wild hog of quarterbacks here, but we just witnessed a playoffs that made it clear that sometimes you need to score points in 13 seconds or less. And if you can't do it, get in line. Like, I mean, like,
you just got to make it happen.
It's brutal. It's crazy. It's wild. And yet here we are. So I don't need, if it's me, Kenny Pickett. I don't need a guy like Matt Corral that we're not even sure if he can take under center snaps. And yes, this is all jokes from a Baylor fan who came out of the spread, like super fast snap Bryles offense and then watched Ole Miss run the same thing. And I mean, every Baylor fan in the stands, because I actually got the chance to go to the Sugar Bowl, was just looking at each other like, oh, we know this. We know how this works. We watched this forever. But so, like, I don't personally trust Corral. I don't trust Pickett. I don't trust Ritter. Like, I don't even necessarily trust Willis. But you got to make your pick eventually. Howell actually really intrigues me. Like,
I'm the same way. I don't know what I think about him, but I just have it in my head that, like, out of this class, like, if it's not Willis, I think it's going to be Hal.
If I got to choose, because I'm a Bears fan, I hope the Lions get stuck with somebody that isn't Malik Willis at 2. I think Willis, let's put it this way, and Q, you may completely disagree because I think this matters. If the idea of Willis on your rival scares you, you like him more than you think. And the idea of Willis on the Lions does scare me. I don't want to deal with that.
I would say... I might catch some flack from this, but I think Jared Goff would scare me more signing long-term with the Lions than just about any quarterback in this draft.
That's surprising. I mean, I completely
Willis is the one guy who would scare me more than that.
I agree.
And I don't think Goff is all that scary, and it's more of a statement on this QB class. But Willis, I mean, the tools
I disagree
there,
on Goff.
man.
I mean, I think it's still there. I mean,
I think
I like Goff a lot.
What I think has gotten confused with Goff forever, and I mean forever, has been that Goff is a phenomenal football thrower. I mean, when he plants his feet and delivers,
he has a cannon.
He's unbelievably accurate. He's unbelievably good. Period. How did he throw for 4,800 yards and then fall to this? How did he do it? It's because, in my opinion, McVay basically could whisper into the huddle, okay, this time throw to this guy, and Goff could make any throw. Didn't matter the window. The problem is that on the Lions, it'll never be that easy. Frankly, for any game he plays, it's just never going to be that easy.
It might be that easy with Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Let's not get too excited about
So Robert, we gotta remind you here. The motto of our podcast is "Don't sleep on the Lions." So,
we're kind of like parody Lions fans, but like at the same time, we've said it enough to where like we kind of agree with it too.
I hear it. The only reason that I can't is because I have heard that the Lions are going to be dark horse NFC North champs and the best bet on the NFC North for 10 years of my life. And they have found inventive ways to lose.
Hey, it's got to happen eventually.
It maybe, but that's what Bears fans have been saying about a quarterback.
That's what Cowboys fans have been saying about an NFC championship.
The main player that I think nobody talks about, but they should talk about. So, look, years ago, 2017, the Bears signed Mike Glennon. And then they traded up for Mitch Trubisky. And the whole NFL world went, what? But they signed a free agent. How could they possibly draft a quarterback? And in 2020, the Bears said, Mitch Trubisky is our starter. And then they traded for Nick Foles, and the whole NFL world went, what? But Trubisky was their starter. And all I'm saying is that imagine which coach fits a wild quarterback with crazy running ability, shocking weight for his size, all the tools you could ask for, except accuracy, which is a little hit and miss from a small school, better than Brian Daboll, who did the same thing with Josh Allen. Why do we need to be stuck on Daniel Jones?
Yeah, I don't think Daboll's as big on Jones as people say he is.
Why would he be?
But I think
it's not his guy.
I also think that Daboll might like him enough to wait and see one more year for next year's crop.
But you have to remember that year that you're waiting through, you are playing Jones.
Yeah.
But how bad do you have to be to spend pick 5, pick 7, the rest of your draft, and still somehow lose your way into the top 10 again?
So
is it even doable?
I think in that scenario, they're trading, if not one, both 5 and 7 in that scenario.
Ooh, like if they were tanking.
Not necessarily tanking, but just loading up.
Right.
Because I mean, you look towards the future, either next year or the year after, and if you're like, I want to see, like, if Daboll's like, I am confident enough in myself, like I'm either going to get everything I can out of Daniel Jones, or I'm going to know pretty quickly that he's not the guy.
Totally.
And at that point, you have the ammunition to go get your guy, whether it's via like trade, free agency, or if you go draft somebody next year. And if this offseason's told us anything this year, is that if you got the picks, somebody will become available next year that you can either go trade for, or if you don't like that, go take. Nothing's coming to me off the top of my head of who's going to be there next year. But there's a big name next year.
You mean like
there?
Bryce Young, CJ Stroud?
Okay, there we go. CJ Stroud. Yeah, CJ Stroud and Bryce Young. Like you go get them next year, or you put a package together and you go trade for somebody who may be unhappy, and go that route.
Well, you could. My problem is that I personally think that if the Jaguars and the Lions, and honestly even the Bears, have taught me anything, it's that it's a lot harder than people realize to get a really high draft pick. I mean, you don't have to just be bad. You have to be like bad. I mean, like
my biggest thing is not necessarily like tanking for a draft pick. It's trading for next year's draft picks to either put a package together and make a trade, or trade up. Like make it happen yourself instead of like expecting paid professionals to go out there and lose games.
100%.
Because it never works out like that. Look at the Texans.
And if it was me, I personally think, well, another one that I bring up, I have to bring this up because I think it's hilarious. A flat out bad Bears team. Ask anybody in Chicago. They thought the Bears were awful. So dismantled the Giants that I think people were flat out embarrassed for Mike Glennon and the product that they put out on the field that day. Because it was just unbelievable watching a flat out bad team that whenever the Bears got the ball, they reminded everybody we're not very good. And
so one of my number one rules of football gambling is always bet against Mike Glennon. And it made me a good amount of money this year.
A lot of money.
Even like the game where Daniel Jones went out at halftime, I went to the live spread. I was like, I got a hammer against Mike Glennon.
I bet I put like 4 units on Mike Glennon, like under 220 yards his first start, and he had like 17 yards in the game. It was like my biggest win of the entire year. It was incredible.
All that to say that if it was me and I wanted to try out Daniel Jones in a market that has clearly showed us that you can still get just about a second round pick value for Carson friggin' Wentz, for crying out loud.
Hey. He almost won MVP one year.
He almost won MVP one year, and now apparently he argues with his coaches and says, "Let me do the things I'm bad at."
Yeah,
and
why
they say, "Carson,
why would I give the ball? Why would I give the ball to Jonathan Taylor when I have this golden arm?
Let me do what I'm bad at.
Who is Jonathan Taylor anyway when I'm Carson Wentz? I was the number 2 overall pick. Was Jonathan Taylor the number 2 overall pick? I didn't think so.
But if it was me, I think it'd be a real coup for New York to take Malik Willis, let him sit behind Daniel Jones for an
I agree
entire
with you.
year. And then at that point, if Jones is good, honestly, you can play with that. You could tag him and trade him. It'd
Figure
be
something
weird.
out.
Played some good value odds at that point.
Yep. Yeah. And then the best part is the league wouldn't have any tape on him at all. People act like that doesn't matter. That makes a huge difference. Like if you could leave him on the bench the entire year, which would be weird because if Daniel Jones was ever bad, you might jump in. And honestly, Daniel gets hurt enough that it's certainly possible. But if you did, you could put him in knowing he's good, or you could already start to figure out your parachute. I get it. It'd be risky. I get it. If theoretically Joe Shane wants to get fluffed up by the media, all he's got to do is take Evan Neal and like Kevon Thibodeau, and then people are just going to stand up for him and clap.
Yeah.
Like that's going to get him to the Super Bowl.
They did the same thing when they took Saquon. They're like, oh, they passed on the quarterback. They took the generational running back that can't miss. It's Barry Sanders 2.0. Like
people loved it too. People ate it up.
People were talking about like it was like the smartest pick ever. It's like we're not going to reach for a quarterback when we can take the best player coming out of college since Bo Jackson. Like it's just going insane, and he has done nothing.
I mean, he was awesome until he got hurt.
He had a great year and a half.
I mean, he was great until he wasn't. Yeah, like I agree with that 100%.
I only say that because it's not like he was a total bust. He was just a running back.
I'm not saying he's even a bust, but I mean, taking him as early as they did and the praise they got from everybody when everybody knows you shouldn't take a running back that high, and people were still like, well, he's different. He's different. It's like, no, not really. Like,
you know who else was different was Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But hey, I'm not saying. I'm just saying.
Hey,
like
Clyde Edwards-Helaire was I think that fit their offense specifically, and it was like you get the 5th-year option with it being in the first round. So if you're going to take a running back and you're picking 31, 32, you might not take the best running back on the board, but you take the best running back that fits your system. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But that's different than a top 5.
It's different than a top 5, but I get it. I've heard everybody say that exact same line. And my thought is, I think that we can hold a hard line on the running back thing. That's really all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%.
Like
this was there, like
there's always a wide receiver or an offensive lineman or something you could stock the cupboards with. And the unfortunate truth is that until they work the wage scale around for running backs, which I legitimately believe they ought to do here at some point because it is ridiculous. You're better off just taking a shot every single year in the 4th or 5th round on a brand new running back, and you'll miss one, you'll hit the next one, and you'll have 2 good running backs every 4 years.
It's the 49ers. Yeah. I mean, just load up on running backs. Just get every running back you can, and one of them's bound to go off for 1,400 yards.
Yep.
Yeah. All right, Robert. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, it was a blast.
We appreciate all your talk.
Absolutely.
Why don't you tell the people a little bit about your content and where they can find you?
Perfect. You can find me over on YouTube at Run Pass Opinion and on WindyCityGridiron.com, where I'm trying to put out as many film pieces as I can. I tend to put my head in the sand too much and don't come out with as much content as I would like to. But I'm seeing if I can figure out better formats to get smaller pieces out than 3.5 hour streams, though, especially during
I love the 3.5 hour streams.
I was gonna say it's not like we're putting those away. They're easier to put together than you realize, but we're gonna try to do edited content, podcasts, and later this year, one thing that you'll see, this is really important, we're gonna be streaming day 2 of the draft. That's gonna be replete with not only the Windy City Gridiron crew, but I mean, we're gonna pull up tape and break down whatever prospects the Bears pick that moment. So we'll get straight into it. You can make whatever decision you want to on the players that they took, but you'll have the film to make that decision.
That is incredible. That is something to look forward to right there.
Love to have you
All
back
right.
on and debate Cowboys and Bears
Let's do it.
anytime you want.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You got a long
All right.
off season ahead, so
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Robert. We'll
Thanks so
we'll talk to you
much.
soon.
Talk to you later.
What a
Man,
great guest.
what a man! He's like the energy. We could have gone for 3 hours.
I know, man. Well, he does. His YouTube videos, he'll go 3-4 hours breaking down a Bears game. It's the most incredible
was
thing I've ever
incredible.
seen.
I got lost and I would look at the time and I'm like, oh man,
I know.
we're already here. But no, that was fantastic stuff. I hope everybody enjoyed it. We were going to talk a little college basketball, so we'll do a quick recap. Model did great. 60% against the spread, 68% money line for the tournament for a month-long
Most of that was in the first
good.
3 rounds.
Hey,
first 3 rounds, it was fire. The Elite 8 and the Final 4 were pretty rough, but I was still at like 5-6 units on it, so I'm pretty happy.
The fact that it went 1-7 in the Elite 8, Final 4, and National Championship combined against the spread and still went 60%, you're doing something right. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, I was. I'm pleased with it, and huge thank you to everyone out there who enjoyed it this year, who followed it, who liked it, and who hassled me when I was late with it on a Saturday morning.
It was always good
I appreciate it all. And I'm gonna be working my hardest all basketball offseason here to make that thing as good as it can be.
We love seeing the support, that's for sure. And shout out again to those Kansas Jayhawks, Rock Chalk, Big 12, let's go. Big 12 just dominating college basketball. It's a run like
4 straight championship runs.
Yes, sir.
Big 12.
Texas Tech going to be back at it next year, getting that dub. Can't wait to see it. But we're nearly 2 hours in. We haven't even spoke about the Masters. It's Augusta. It's the spring. The azaleas are out. People are eating their pimento cheese sandwiches.
Where'd your hat go?
I forgot to put on my Masters hat. It's Masters time, boys. And this is officially licensed Masters gear. As you can see, I bought this straight from Augusta National. It's definitely not fake by any means. That is a perfect replica of the United States with the flag. But I'm just so excited to hear Jim Nance's voice tomorrow. Seeing green grass on my TV, seeing the flowers and the fake bird noises being pumped into the audio. It's a time like no other. Coming right out of March Madness. March Madness went a little long this year. Masters starting a week later. It's the perfect time of the year. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to win all my Masters bets.
What are the bets?
All right, let's get into some Masters bets here. All right, starting out with the top 10 finish. We have the PlayStation Fortnite reigning and defending champion Max Homa with a top 10 finish at plus 650. I wanted to take Max Homa to make the cut, and apparently Vegas loves him a lot more than I thought they did because they got him at minus 250 to make the cut. I don't even know if he's going to make the cut, but I wasn't going to bet against him not to make the cut, but I wanted to bet on him because I love him. So put him in there for a top 10 finish. Maybe the boy will surprise us. He comes up, hits that plus 650. Boy, we partying then. And then moving on to my top, I have these for my top 5 finishes. For top 5 finishes, I have Adam Scott plus 1,000, former Masters champion. I love former champions in the Masters betting for top 5, top 10, top 15, top 20 finishes. They just know what it takes to win at Augusta, and I love that. Next up, another former champion, won it twice, Brooks Koepka plus 420 for a top 5 finish. Love this one a lot. Brooks is always in it going into Sunday, no matter what. He's going to be in that top 10, top 15 range. He can put together some birdies late in the day, get that top 5 finish for us. Easy cash right there. Last one, another 2-time winner, Bubba Watson. Bubba, whenever he's hitting the ball well and getting off the tee box and not slicing everything like a crazy man, he can put a low score together real quick. I
You
love
said
him.
that was top 5?
Top 5 finishes, yes, sir. And Bubba Watson plus 1,200 for a top 5 finish. 2-time Masters winner. He's got 2 green jackets in his closet. I love the value there. I love chasing value on stuff like this. And plus 1,200. I love the value more than I love Bubba Watson here, not going to lie. But great value for a top 5 finish, in my opinion. And then my last one, pick to win. One of the best young golfers in the game of golf right now. He has the best iron game in the sport. It is Mr. Colin Morikawa himself. Love this pick right here. Plus 1,800 coming off an injury. He said he's hitting his putter better than he has his entire life. And if that is true, if this dude can get off the tee box and set himself up for good second and third shots with the best irons in the game, could see some low scores if he's making one putts. Dude's putting birdie almost every hole. It's just whether or not he can one putt. And if he can one putt, you better watch out because this dude can post a monster score on the board. So I love Colin Morikawa plus 1,800 to win it all. And those are my Masters picks.
I'll probably follow most of those. I might play around with top 5 or top 10 on some of them, but I'll probably follow most of those generally.
We're all gonna hit.
I've got a handful of them here. So I got Siwoo Kim. Is that how you say it? Siwoo Kim? Siwoo Kim?
Siwoo Kim. Yep.
Top 20 finisher.
Absolutely destroyed me last year.
Yeah. And then Louis Oosthuizen. I don't know if I said that right.
Louis Oosthuizen.
He said top 20 finish.
Probably the second best iron hitter in the game. I love Louis as well.
That's why he's here, because
didn't love
irons
his value.
play at the Masters.
Didn't love his value, but
really? He had pretty good value at top 20.
What was it? What'd you get him at top 20?
I don't remember what
top
it
5,
was,
top 10.
but it was like plus 300, plus 350, something like that, which I thought was pretty solid.
Yeah, I think Adam Scott had a little bit better odds at top 5, and that's why I took Adam Scott, because I was between him and Louis.
And then I got Justin Thomas in the top 5.
Very good. Good value. Incredible golfer.
And then I got 2 guys to win. And these are all based on numbers. Just researching some numbers about who does the best on par 5s, who's the best with their irons on layups, and a few other factors. Daniel Berger to win. That was a plus 4,000.
Way up there.
And then Scotty Scheffler. And that one was only like
Scheffler's
plus 1,600 or something. But I mean, I still think that's a good bet.
Some other guys, keep your eye on Shane Lowry. If you can find any like heads up player props for Shane Lowry, I like him a lot this weekend. And it's like sacrilegious and almost like a punishable by death bet, but Tiger Woods to miss the cut at even money is pretty good value.
It wasn't even money when I looked, because I looked at that and it was like minus 160 when I looked.
I looked yesterday and it was minus like 115, which I consider
it's been bet down even. It's minus 160 when I looked.
Okay,
because I had the same thought. I had the same
bet
thought
against Tiger.
Yeah. That's a sin. And then I think you got some UFC picks for the people, don't you?
UFC 273, the biggest card of the year so far. We're only in April, so that's not very surprising. But we got 2 title fights. It's a monster card, action from top to bottom. And this is the time of year where if you've never watched UFC, I say this every card, but if you've never watched UFC, this is definitely a card you can jump into, watch it from prelims all the way through. Should be enjoyable. But first fight of the night, I got Julio Arce inside the distance in the decision, ITD or KO, TKO, sub, disqualification, whatever you want to call it. I have him winning basically before the time runs out at plus 240. Love that pick. First fight of the night, so that's gonna probably pop off around like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. I can't remember exactly what time this card starts. I can probably pull it up for us real quick. Around 4 o'clock Central Time. So if you want that one, get it then. My next one is Ian Gary. Inside the distance. So Ian Gary to win before the fight is over. That is plus 110. This dude is an animal. He cannot be stopped. The total for this fight is 1.5, and it is very, very highly juiced to go under that. One of the biggest favorites on the card. Yeah, I like this dude. You want to take this dude, a lot of value you can get for him. I think you can take him in the second round, and I think you get him in the second round at plus 550. I think that is great value as well, but I'm just taking him to win inside the distance at plus 110. My next one is Mackenzie Dern, minus 115, and she is fighting Taysha Torres. And I've been kind of split on this one. Mackenzie Dern she's a bad bitch though. I've bet against her last 2 fights, and she's lost me money both times. So I'm hopping on the Dern train. I love Mackenzie Dern in this. It's basically a pick 'em. So her and Torres are both minus 115. So it just depends on who you like better. So those are my 3 singles that I have. Then I have 2 parlays for the boys. One of them's a 4-fight parlay. All heavy favorites for the most part. I have this is one of the hardest name cards, by the way, I've ever seen in my life. So I know how to say all these names, but I don't know how to actually speak these names. So Jairzinho Rozenstruik to win, along with Khamzat Chimaev, I believe is how you say his last name, Chimaev. And then Piotr Jan, which is spelled nothing like Piotr Jan. And then Alexander Volkanovski. And those 4 put together pay 170. They're all pretty heavy favorites. I love Chimaev, Piotr Jan, and Volkanovski. I love those 3 all together. It wasn't quite plus money, so I added Rozenstruik to it. But if you don't like Rozenstruik, take him out, take those 3, and I think it's like $1 to 163 cents. So still decent value there for, I think, a shoe-in to win all 3 of those fights. And then my last one's another parlay, and this one is an under parlay. So I have under 1.5 rounds, and the Alexei Oleinik and Vendura fight. It's a heavyweight fight. Always love the under in heavyweight fights. It's always 1 strike away. After that, under 2.5 rounds. They're giving you 2.5 rounds for a heavyweight fight with Tybura and Rozenstruik. And if you want to take that one by itself, it's minus 150. But you're basically betting that a heavyweight fight won't go the distance. I mean, you have a 2.5-minute window there, but you're getting 2.5 rounds on a heavyweight fight. Give me the under all day. And then the last one is under 1.5 in the Gilbert Burns Khamzat Chimaev fight. And if you've never seen Chimaev, I cannot say it. He's one of the best fighters in the game. Chimaev, if you've never seen this dude fight, he's like an anaconda, but worse. He is every bit as dominant as Nurmagomedov was coming up, and maybe even better. And I think he flies through Gilbert Burns. If the site that I use doesn't have the prop available, but if you can take Chimaev to win in the first round by submission, the odds are probably well into like the plus 500 range. I hop on it and take it and ride with it all day. He is going to dominate Burns, and I think the fight is over very, very, very quickly. So, and that 3-fight parlay pays plus 507.
507.
That's $1 to win, $5.07. You can buy 2 Big Macs with that kind of money.
Upgrade
But-
from a McDouble to 2 Big Macs right there.
Yes, sir. But that's my UFC card. Love it. Love this card. I've been ice cold lately. I've been ice cold for a month straight. You know what that means? About to get hot, boys.
Means you're due.
It means I'm due. So excited for this UFC card. So excited for the Masters. It's the best time of the year besides football season.
And March
cannot
Madness.
Oh, and we forgot to mention, because we had a tweet about 8 months ago from a Mr. King James, saying, I don't know, the tweet's since been deleted, but it said something along the lines of, don't talk about this team like you know us, blah, blah, blah. We're too old. We can't shoot. Keep that same energy come May. Well, we're almost to May. We have that same energy, Mr. King LeBron. And unfortunately,
King of Cleveland, maybe.
Unfortunately, this team you assembled, because you're the GM, can't even make a play-in game. A play-in game.
Well, I mean, they can't make a 3.
Where
How are they going to make a playing game?
66% of the league makes the playoffs. You have multiple MVPs on your team, and you can't even make a play-in game? 66% of the league makes the playoffs. So, Coach K is dead, LeBron's dead, and everybody is happy. And whatever you do,
end.
do not sleep on the